It's time for another Top Shelf Spotlight. I'm Sylvain Perrier, President and CEO of Mercatus. Mercatus recently published a research piece titled Pricing's Potential Role for Improving Online Grocery Performance for Regional Grocers, which we actually recently unveiled at Grocery Tech in Cincinnati. Now, the research reveals that regional grocers are facing a really strong and tougher time fighting online against low price market leaders like Walmart and Target, and where they can actually adapt their online pricing strategy and offset some of their additional costs. So here are the three realities from the report. Reality number one is pickup, dominant market solution, very much stronger than delivery. But it introduces incremental costs, which can add approximately $13 in direct labor costs associated with assembling and distributing an order. So let's break down those numbers. $12.62, that's for a person to pick, pack, assemble, put the bags together, put them in a staging environment. And that is based on an order of approximately 37 SKUs, 7 bags, and a fully loaded labor rate of approximately $21.20. There's an incremental $1.08, and that is for destaging the order and bringing it out to the consumer, whether they're standing in the store, at a customer service desk, or maybe they're in their vehicle. So again, it adds an incremental $1.08. Reality number two is demand has softened, and quite frankly, growth is decelerating. We're no longer in the pandemic. So it is challenging the way regional grocers are approaching their costs and how they can offset them and improve profitability for online orders. Reality number three is, Walmart and Target and the national rivals have a stronger opportunity to offset their cost base via ancillary revenue in the form of media networks, sponsorships with CPGs, leveraging dollars from their in-store shopper marketing programs, and so on. So here are my recommendations to help you out. Number one, measure what you have. Determine your cost base. I think you need to understand your operating model and how is it working or potentially not working. What are your KPIs telling you? If you don't have KPIs, that's a big no-no. You need to go back to the drawing board to understand that. Now, once you understand what you have, my second recommendation is look at modeling enhancements. Where can you squeeze costs out of your process? And I think the obvious one, first and foremost, is doubling up on the number of orders you're picking and packing. So if you could do that, you'll go from $12.62 down to below $8. If you can triple up on orders, you'll go from $12.62 down to below $6. Again, fundamentally depends on your labor efficiency. My third recommendation is, how are you pricing your service fees, or are you avoiding that conversation? Don't avoid the conversation. Go head on. Understand what you could be charging. Consumers today understand that e-commerce, especially around the world of food retail, is a convenience. It is a service. They will pay for great service. You may want to look at a tiered structure. Maybe if I'm spending as a customer over a certain amount, you won't charge me. I think that's a great way to consolidate all of the items into one basket. It's a big benefit to you as the retailer. Look also at maybe stacking your orders in a way that your labor is more efficient. They're busier. And if customers want to pick in the morning, drop by the store so they get their order, maybe you charge them less because you're not as busy. If they're coming during peak periods, 4 to 7 typically, 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. that is, you'll charge them a little bit more. Look also offsetting costs through your media networks. Maybe pick sponsorship. Today's pick brought to you by Coca-Cola. You get a free 2 liters of Coke and so on. Don't forget, and this is my last recommendation here, a lot of retailers forget the cost of taking the items from inside the store out to a car has an impact on labor. I shared with you at the top $1.08. You want to transition those costs as part of your fees. Communicate to your customers, let them know, and iterate. And don't forget, what doesn't get measured does not get improved. So I hope you enjoyed today's Spotlight. And if you want to access this report, go ahead and reach out to Mercatus and make sure you get a copy.